It was a cool Saturday morning in late October, the kind where the air carries just enough chill to remind you that another season has quietly slipped away. You pushed your shopping cart through the produce aisle, stopping in front of a display piled high with bright red apples, polished carrots, glossy grapes, and perfectly shaped tomatoes. They looked healthy. They looked fresh. The labels promised farm fresh and premium quality. You filled your cart without thinking twice. $48 later, you drove home convinced you had done something good for yourself. By lunchtime, those vegetables were chopped into a colorful salad. Dinner looked beautiful on the table. Yet when you stood up afterward, your knees reminded you that appearances and nourishment are not always the same thing. The stiffness returned before you reached the kitchen sink. Your shoulders ached as you reached for the cupboard. Your fingers felt tight wrapping around a coffee mug the next morning. Weeks passed, and nothing changed except the grocery bill. Then came another Saturday. Your daughter asked if you could help rake the leaves before the grandchildren arrived. You smiled and agreed. 15 minutes later, you were leaning on the rake, pretending to admire the maple tree, while quietly waiting for the pain in your lower back to ease. Your grandson ran over with a football, asking if you would throw it with him just once. You wanted to. You truly did. Instead, you told him maybe later. He nodded politely before running back towards someone younger, who could still move without thinking about every step. That moment stayed with you much longer than the ache itself. It was not just about sore joints anymore. It was about the quiet feeling that your own body had started making decisions for you. Now I want you to sit with this for just a moment. Most people do not lose comfortable movement because they suddenly became old. They lose it because thousands of ordinary meals slowly taught their bodies to stay inflamed, one dinner plate at a time. There is no luck in staying strong after 50. There are only habits that quietly work for you or quietly work against you. Every farmer's wife in Lancaster County understood that long before anyone used the word inflammation. Esther still talks about how her mother would stand beside the old wooden pantry every autumn, sorting onions, garlic, olives, herbs, and jars of honey, while explaining which foods helped tired hands recover after harvest. Her grandmother had learned the same lessons from her own mother decades earlier. Nobody called it nutrition science. They simply watched what happened after years of planting fields, lifting baskets, kneading bread, and caring for families. Certain foods always found their way back onto the table because they helped people keep working, long after their neighbors had begun slowing down. That knowledge was never written on glossy packaging. It was passed quietly from grandmother to daughter, from daughter to granddaughter, around kitchen tables instead of classrooms. My name is Elias Yoder. I am Amish and I farm here in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. For more than 40 years, I have watched food grow from healthy soil instead of supermarket shelves. And during today's visit, I want to share 15 biblical foods that have stood the test of both scripture and modern nutritional science. Give me the next few minutes, and by the end you'll know which foods deserve a permanent place in your kitchen and which expensive health foods simply cannot compare. There is far more to these old food traditions than could ever fit into a single conversation. So I gathered many of our family's recipes and stories together at eliasyoder.com. I will not mention it again because today our attention belongs here, in the kitchen. The first food is olive oil. Most people remember olive oil because of the parable of the Good Samaritan, who poured oil and wine onto wounds to comfort an injured traveler. But olive oil was never reserved only for healing cuts. It was a daily food throughout the lands of the Bible. Extra virgin olive oil contains powerful natural compounds called polyphenols, especially one known as oleocanthal. Scientists discovered that oleocanthal behaves in surprisingly similar ways to certain anti-inflammatory medicines by gently reducing inflammatory pathways inside the body. It is not magic, and it does not replace proper medical care, but it reminds us that God often placed remarkable things inside ordinary foods. Esther still smiles whenever she remembers dipping fresh bread into olive oil after long afternoons harvesting vegetables. She says her father believed a meal without good olive oil was like a lantern without a flame. When you shop, choose extra virgin olive oil in a dark glass bottle. If it tastes slightly peppery at the back of your throat, that sharpness often signals the very compounds your joints may appreciate. If it tastes flat, greasy, or completely bland, walk away. The second food is garlic. Scripture mentions garlic among the foods remembered by the Israelites during their years connected to Egypt. Today we know garlic contains allicin, a sulfur-rich compound that forms only after the clove has been crushed or chopped. That tiny detail matters more than most people realize. Esther always crushed garlic first, then let it rest for about 10 minutes before cooking. She learned that trick from her mother long before scientists explained why. Allowing garlic to rest gives the enzymes time to create more allicin before heat begins breaking it down. Many shoppers buy jars of already minced garlic because they seem convenient. Yet fresh cloves usually deliver stronger flavor and more of the natural compounds that make garlic valuable in the first place. The third food is pomegranates. The Bible describes pomegranates decorating priestly garments and the temple itself, making them one of Scripture's most recognizable fruits. Cut one open, and you discover hundreds of deep ruby seeds packed together so tightly they almost look handcrafted. Those little seeds contain antioxidants called punicalagins and anthocyanins that help reduce oxidative stress, one of the hidden drivers of chronic inflammation. Esther loved placing fresh pomegranate seeds over simple salads every autumn because she believed beautiful food encouraged grateful hearts. Modern research simply gives scientific language to something families quietly observed for generations. When choosing a pomegranate, ignore the smooth, shiny appearance that casual shoppers often chase. Pick one that feels surprisingly heavy for its size and has firm, slightly squared sides. That weight usually tells you the fruit is filled with rich, juicy seeds, rather than empty space. The fourth food is barley, one of the oldest grains mentioned throughout the Bible. It fed ordinary families, travelers, and entire communities because it was dependable, filling, and surprisingly nourishing. Today we know barley is rich in a special soluble fiber called beta-glucan, which helps calm inflammation by supporting a healthier gut. Many people think joint pain begins in their knees or hips, but researchers increasingly understand that much of the body's inflammation begins in the digestive system. Esther never served barley because it was fashionable. She served it because everyone worked harder and recovered better after eating it. If you find barley at the grocery store, choose whole-hulled barley whenever possible, instead of the highly processed quick cooking versions. The extra cooking time is often worth the extra nourishment. The fifth food is figs. When Adam and Eve covered themselves with fig leaves, the fig tree became one of the earliest plants mentioned in Scripture. Later, the Bible repeatedly describes every man sitting peacefully beneath his own vine and fig tree, symbols of blessing, provision, and health. Fresh and dried figs provide fiber, potassium, calcium, and natural plant compounds that help support healthy muscles and bones. Esther's grandmother kept dried figs in a glass jar beside the kitchen window throughout winter. Whenever someone's joints felt especially stiff after working in the cold, a few figs often appeared beside breakfast oatmeal. Casual shoppers usually reach for the softest fruit, believing softer always means sweeter. Instead, look for figs that feel gently soft but still hold their shape. If they are leaking, overly wrinkled, or smell fermented, quietly walk away. The sixth food is lentils. Esau famously traded his birthright for a bowl of lentil stew, proving that humble foods have always carried tremendous value. Lentils are packed with plant protein, iron, magnesium, and fiber, nutrients that help muscles recover while supporting a balanced inflammatory response. Esther liked to remind the grandchildren that strength rarely comes from expensive meals. More often, it comes from simple foods prepared faithfully over many years. When shopping, compare different colors of lentils rather than grabbing the first bag you see. Green, brown, and black varieties tend to hold their texture better during cooking, making them excellent additions to soups and stews that nourish the body without relying on heavily processed ingredients. The seventh food is honey. Scripture repeatedly describes the Promised Land as flowing with milk and honey, making honey one of the Bible's most cherished foods. Raw honey contains natural antioxidants and beneficial compounds that disappear when heavily processed. That does not mean you should eat large amounts every day. Honey is still sugar. The wisdom lies in replacing highly refined sweeteners with something closer to the way God created it. Esther always bought honey from local beekeepers whenever she could. She believed healthy bees reflected healthy fields. Most casual shoppers choose the clearest bottle because it looks cleaner. Ironically, raw honey often appears cloudy or naturally crystallized. Those tiny crystals are not signs that something is wrong. They are often signs that very little has been taken away. Before I continue, I simply want to thank everyone who has become part of our growing community. Every week, families write to tell me they are cooking together again, planting small gardens, and teaching grandchildren the old ways. If you would ever like to join us, there is a link waiting in the description. Now, let's continue, because my favorite food is still ahead. The eighth food is walnuts. Although walnuts are not mentioned by name as often as olives or figs, they were known throughout the biblical world and have nourished Mediterranean families for thousands of years. Their shape has always fascinated children because they resemble the human brain, yet their greatest gift may be to the joints. Walnuts contain plant-based omega-3 fats that help support the body's natural ability to manage inflammation. Esther often sprinkled chopped walnuts over morning oats or mixed them into homemade bread during colder months when fresh produce became less available. Listen carefully when buying walnuts. Fresh walnuts have a mild, nutty aroma. If they smell sharp, bitter, or like old paint, the healthy oils have likely turned rancid. Leave those behind. The ninth food is grapes. The Bible mentions vineyards hundreds of times because grapes represented abundance, celebration, and faithful cultivation. Modern science has discovered that dark grapes contain resveratrol and other powerful antioxidants that help protect cells from chronic inflammation. Esther used to smile whenever harvest season painted the vineyards purple because she believed every cluster carried a reminder that patience produces good fruit. Choose grapes with firm stems and fruit that clings tightly together. Loose stems and shriveled grapes tell a different story. The 10th food is leafy herbs like parsley and mint. While they often receive little attention beside larger vegetables, these herbs were treasured throughout biblical cooking. Parsley provides vitamin K, while mint offers soothing plant compounds that support digestion. Sometimes it is not one spectacular ingredient that changes your health, but dozens of small faithful choices repeated every day. Esther never decorated meals with herbs simply because they looked pretty. She believed every handful belonged there for a reason. The 11th food is onions. Like garlic, onions have been valued for thousands of years. They contain quercetin, a natural antioxidant that helps calm inflammatory stress throughout the body. Slice a fresh onion and your eyes may water, but those same sulfur compounds are part of what makes onions so valuable. Esther laughed whenever grandchildren complained about chopping onions. She would simply say, "Sometimes the foods that make us cry are the same foods that quietly help us heal." The 12th food is fish, especially those rich in healthy fats. While the Sea of Galilee supplied much of the fish eaten during biblical times, today's research explains why those meals mattered. Fatty fish provide omega-3 fatty acids that help reduce inflammatory chemicals throughout the body. If fish becomes part of your weekly meals, choose varieties that are fresh, smell clean like the sea, and never carry a strong fishy odor. The 13th food is dates. Throughout Scripture, date palms symbolized blessing, endurance, and fruitfulness. Dates provide potassium, magnesium, and natural energy without relying on heavily processed sweets. Esther packed dates whenever long days in the field stretched beyond lunchtime because they provided lasting energy without leaving everyone sluggish afterward. The 14th food is almonds. Aaron's rod famously blossomed with almonds, making them another beautiful biblical symbol of life and renewal. Almonds provide healthy fats, vitamin E, and magnesium that support muscles, nerves, and healthy joints. A small handful each day is usually plenty. More is not always better. Consistency is. The 15th and perhaps most overlooked food is bitter greens. Many families avoid them because they are not naturally sweet, yet bitterness often signals valuable plant compounds that support the body's own protective systems. Foods like dandelion greens, mustard greens, and similar leafy vegetables remind us that not everything good for us arrives wrapped in sweetness. Esther always said our taste buds could be trained just like our hands. Give them enough time, and they begin appreciating what once seemed unpleasant. Now I want to take a moment because this is where everything comes together. Olive oil teaches us that simple foods often carry extraordinary gifts. Garlic reminds us that even the smallest kitchen habit matters. Pomegranates fill ordinary meals with remarkable protection. Barley strengthens us from the inside out. Figs reward patience. Lentils prove humble meals can build lasting strength. Honey shows that nature's sweetness should be respected, not abused. Walnuts, grapes, herbs, onions, fish, dates, almonds, and bitter greens each add another thread to a pattern that has quietly served families for generations. Like the bees gathering nectar, the vines climbing toward sunlight, and the fields ripening one season after another, lasting health is rarely built by one dramatic choice. It grows through faithful daily nourishment. So why did so many people forget these foods? Because there is very little money in teaching families how to recognize truly nourishing ingredients. Grocery stores earn far more by selling convenience than by preserving old kitchen wisdom. Busy schedules replaced shared meals. Packaged foods replaced family recipes. Grandmothers stopped teaching daughters because life became faster, and daughters had fewer opportunities to teach their own children. Little by little, knowledge that once passed naturally across generations simply faded away. The wonderful news is that it is not lost forever. Every time you prepare one of these foods, every time you explain to a grandchild why olive oil matters or why fresh garlic deserves a place on the cutting board, that chain begins to reconnect. You no longer have to guess. You can understand why these foods have remained trusted for thousands of years. So here is what I would love for you to do this week. Visit a local farm stand if one is nearby. If not, your neighborhood grocery store will do just fine. Choose 2 or 3 of the foods we discussed today. Compare them carefully in your hands. Feel their weight. Notice their color. Smell them before placing them into your basket. On Saturday, gather your family around the kitchen table. Pour a little olive oil onto fresh bread. Sprinkle pomegranate seeds over a salad. Roast garlic beside vegetables. Share walnuts, grapes, or figs after dinner. Let the children taste everything and ask questions. Those conversations are every bit as valuable as the meal itself. That is how knowledge comes back, not through lectures, but through families learning together one meal at a time. Tell me in the comments below, which of these biblical foods surprised you the most? Or is there a food your grandmother always kept in her kitchen that your family still treasures today? I read every single comment, and some of the greatest lessons I have ever shared on this channel first came from stories written by families just like yours. Those little traditions are heirlooms every bit as precious as old photographs. Next time, since we have been speaking of the foods that nourish the body, our natural next step is to explore the biblical drinks that have refreshed hardworking people for generations and what modern science is discovering about them today. I think you will be surprised how ordinary ingredients can quietly become extraordinary blessings. Until then, remember this: the richest harvest is not always the one that fills the biggest basket. It is the one that helps you rise each morning ready to walk through God's creation with gratitude. Like the sun warming the fields, the bees returning to their flowers, and the vines faithfully bearing fruit each season, may your table always become a place where old wisdom grows new strength.